This adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel brought the character to life in a captivating and chilling manner. Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula remains one of the most memorable in cinematic history. His haunting presence, accent, and magnetic charisma lent an eerie charm to the character, leaving an indelible mark on the portrayal of vampires in popular culture. The film's cinematography, especially considering the era it was made in, deserves commendation. The use of shadows and gothic imagery created an atmosphere of suspense and foreboding, enhancing the overall sense of dread throughout the movie. However, some viewers might find the pacing slow by today's standards, and the special effects are understandably dated. Additionally, certain deviations from Stoker's original story might disappoint purists, as the film takes creative liberties to adapt the narrative for the screen. Nevertheless, Dracula remains an essential piece of cinema history, setting the stage for numerous vampire-themed films that followed. Its influence on the horror genre and popular culture cannot be overstated. For fans of classic horror or those interested in the evolution of vampire lore on screen, Dracula is an essential watch. Dracula from 1931 is considered a classic for several reasons. Cultural impact. This movie was a groundbreaking moment in cinematic history for the horror genre. It popularized the vampire archetype in a way that hadn't been seen before on the silver screen, setting a standard for future horror films. Iconic performance. Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Count Dracula is legendary. His performance defined the character in the public imagination, establishing the image and mannerisms associated with vampires for decades to come. Atmosphere and mood. Despite technical limitations of its time, the film created a haunting atmosphere through its use of lighting, shadows, and gothic set designs. It relied on atmosphere and suggestion, leveraging the audience's imagination to build tension and fear. Pioneering horror tropes. Dracula introduced and popularized many tropes and elements that became staples of the horror genre, such as the charismatic yet sinister vampire, the use of bats and coffins, and the portrayal of the vampire's powers. Historical significance. As one of the earliest successful horror films, Dracula laid the groundwork for the horror genre's development in cinema. Its influence can be seen in countless subsequent vampire and horror movies. Cinematic legacy. Beyond its immediate impact, Dracula has maintained its relevance and influence, continuously referenced and revered in the realms of horror and popular culture. Ultimately, its enduring legacy, impact on cinema, and the way it shaped the portrayal of vampires make Dracula a revered classic, even decades after its initial release. Here's an expanded perspective on why Dracula from 1931 is considered a timeless classic. Cultural zeitgeist. The film arrived at a time when societal interests were shifting towards the macabre and mysterious. It tapped into the fascination with the supernatural, capturing the imaginations of audiences who were intrigued by the unknown. Bela Lugosi's enigmatic Dracula. Lugosi's performance wasn't just memorable, it was transformative. His commanding presence, accent, and captivating gaze added a layer of seductive menace to the character. He brought an aristocratic charm to the role, making Dracula simultaneously alluring and terrifying. Pioneering sound design. Dracula was one of the early sound films in the horror genre. While limited by the technology of the time, its use of sound effects and haunting music contributed significantly to the film's eerie ambience. The absence of a musical score during crucial moments added to the tension, leaving audiences on edge. Cinematic evolution. This adaptation marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of horror cinema. It laid the groundwork for subsequent horror films, influencing not just vampire-centric movies but also shaping the broader horror landscape with its emphasis on mood, atmosphere, and psychological terror. Enduring symbolism. The image of Bela Lugosi as Dracula has become an enduring symbol in popular culture, recognizable across generations. It's a testament to the film's impact that even now, his portrayal remains an iconic representation of vampires. Cinematic interpretation of source material. While it deviates from Bram Stoker's novel in certain aspects, the film's interpretation introduced Dracula to a wider audience. It distilled the essence of the story into a visually compelling narrative that suited the medium of film. In essence, Dracula transcends its era, continuing to captivate audiences and inspire filmmakers. Its combination of atmospheric storytelling, Lugosi's unforgettable performance, and its influence on cinematic techniques firmly secure its place as an immortal classic in the pantheon of horror cinema. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of the 1931 Dracula movie. Advantages: cultural impact. The film's release was a milestone in horror cinema, setting a precedent for the portrayal of vampires and influencing countless movies in the genre. Iconic performance. Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Count Dracula is legendary, defining the character in a way that has had a lasting impact on pop culture. Atmosphere and mood. Despite technical limitations, the movie created an eerie and foreboding atmosphere through its use of lighting, shadows, and set designs, enhancing the sense of dread. Pioneering tropes. Dracula introduced and popularized many vampire tropes and elements that became staples in the genre, shaping the way vampires were depicted in future films. Cinematic legacy. Its enduring legacy and cultural significance have cemented its place in cinema history, ensuring its relevance even decades after its release. Disadvantages. Pacing and story adaptation. By modern standards, the pacing might feel slow, and the film takes creative liberties with the source material, which might disappoint purists expecting a more faithful adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel. Dated special effects. The movie's special effects and technical aspects, including makeup and visual effects, are understandably dated compared to contemporary standards, which might affect the immersive experience for some viewers. Limited sound and dialogue. While a pioneering sound film, the early sound technology limited the movie's ability to fully utilize dialogue and sound effects, occasionally affecting the storytelling and emotional impact. Deviation from novel. Some fans of the original novel might find the film's deviations from the source material to be a drawback, as it alters certain character dynamics and plot elements for cinematic purposes. In essence, while Dracula from 1931 stands as a groundbreaking classic with an enduring legacy, its limitations in pacing, technical aspects, and deviations from the source material might affect its reception among modern audiences. Nonetheless, its cultural impact and historical significance in the horror genre remain undeniable. The movie's use of shadowy cinematography and gothic aesthetics, despite the technical constraints of its era, managed to evoke a palpable sense of dread and foreboding. While the narrative took liberties with Bram Stoker's original novel, the film distilled the essence of the story, focusing on the magnetic power and sinister charm of the titular character. Dracula emerged as a landmark in cinematic history, carving its place not only as a classic horror film but also as a cultural touchstone that continues to influence and inspire filmmakers and audiences alike. Its enduring legacy lies not only in its chilling tale, but also in the way it shaped the portrayal of vampires and the horror genre on the silver screen. Set in the atmospheric backdrop of Transylvania and England, the movie follows the ominous journey of Count Dracula, a centuries-old vampire, as he leaves his ancestral home to prey upon the unsuspecting inhabitants of London. The story begins with Renfield, a solicitor, traveling to Transylvania to finalize a real estate transaction with Count Dracula. Little does Renfield know that he is entering a realm of darkness and ancient evil. Upon arriving at Dracula's castle, Renfield encounters the enigmatic Count, whose mesmerizing presence and supernatural powers slowly ensnare him. Dracula reveals his true nature to Renfield, making him his loyal servant and manipulating him into traveling to England together. As the narrative transitions to London, strange occurrences and mysterious deaths start plaguing the city. Dr. Seward, a psychiatrist, runs a sanitarium where his patient Renfield exhibits increasingly bizarre behavior, obsessed with consuming living creatures in a bid to gain immortality from his master, Count Dracula. Meanwhile, Dracula sets his sights on Mina, the fiancée of Jonathan Harker, who had a harrowing encounter with the vampire in Transylvania. Dracula's hypnotic powers draw Mina under his spell, and her health deteriorates as she falls further under his thrall. In an effort to combat this supernatural threat, Dr. Van Helsing, an expert in obscure phenomena, arrives on the scene. Van Helsing is quick to recognize the signs of vampirism and identifies Dracula as the malevolent force behind the unsettling events. A cat-and-mouse game ensues between Dracula and Van Helsing, each attempting to outwit the other. Van Helsing, armed with knowledge of vampire lore, leads the pursuit to destroy Dracula and break his hold over Mina and Renfield. Their confrontation reaches its climax as Dracula's powers wane in the face of the professor's expertise and determination. The story culminates in a dramatic showdown at Dracula's lair, where Van Helsing and his allies confront the vampire. Using sacred symbols and the power of faith, they manage to drive a stake through Dracula's heart, ultimately ending his reign of terror. The film's conclusion brings a sense of relief as the threat of Dracula is vanquished, Mina is freed from his influence, and Renfield meets his demise. However, the haunting legacy of the vampire's existence lingers, reminding audiences of the eternal struggle between light and darkness, good and evil. Dracula stands as a timeless tale of horror, weaving together themes of seduction, fear, and the eternal battle between the supernatural and humanity. Its legacy endures through its atmospheric storytelling, iconic performances, and lasting influence on the portrayal of vampires in popular culture.